The family had just moved into their new home, an old house filled with echoes of the past. They are a family of 4: Emma, her husband James, their daughter Olivia, and their son Ethan. The attic was packed with dusty boxes, forgotten furniture, and hidden treasures waiting to be found. In the corner of the attic, Olivia found an old photograph. The woman in the picture was from another time, her face empty and still. Yet something about her eyes felt alive, watching. Emma loved the old look of the photograph. She saw it as a piece of history, something to give their new home a story. But some stories are better left untold. They didn't know. This photograph was more than an old relic. It carried secrets, shadows of a past that refused to be forgotten. The family gathers in the living room, admiring the vintage photograph they've brought down from the attic. The living room is warm and cozy, filled with family photos and soft lighting from table lamps. They decide to hang the framed photo of the mysterious woman on the wall. Olivia glances at the photograph, her expression subtly shifting from curiosity to unease as she feels the woman's eyes following her. The night was still, the house silent. Olivia sat in the living room, her book providing comfort, but something else was there, quietly watching. The photograph hung silently on the wall, yet tonight it felt different. Her eyes, once blank and distant, seemed sharper, more alive. Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that the woman was watching her. Was it just her imagination? Or had the woman in the photograph begun to change? Watching, waiting for the right moment. A few days after hanging the photograph, Olivia passes by it on her way to the kitchen. She pauses, feeling an odd pull to look at it again. At first glance, the photograph looks the same, but something about the woman's expression feels different. She senses a slight shift in the woman's mouth, as if she's almost smiling, a barely noticeable curve at the edges of her lips. Olivia felt it, a chill creeping up her spine, a silent warning that there was more to this photograph than met the eye. Disturbed, Olivia calls her mother, Emma, to check. But her mother saw nothing unusual, nothing to worry about. Just an old photo, she insisted, a relic of the past. Emma brushes it off, attributing it to Olivia's imagination and insisting that the photograph is just an old, harmless family relic. Olivia reluctantly agrees, but continues to feel a lingering unease. That night, Olivia struggles to sleep, haunted by the image of the woman's faint, unsettling smile. The next morning, the family receives news of an unexpected death in the extended family, a distant, elderly relative. The family is saddened, but dismisses it as coincidence, not yet realizing the sinister connection between the photograph and the tragedy. A few days after the first shift in the photograph, Olivia passes by the photo again, feeling an inexplicable urge to look at it. This time, the changes are even more apparent. The woman's expression is now unmistakably different. Her lips are slightly parted, and there's a sharper glint in her eyes. The faint smile has deepened into something far more chilling. Olivia's heart pounds as she realizes that this isn't her imagination. The photograph's expression is transforming in a way that defies logic, and her unease grows into fear. She quickly calls her brother, Ethan, to check if he sees it too, hoping for confirmation. Ethan reluctantly looks at the photo, but to her surprise, he sees nothing unusual and brushes it off. Later that evening, as Olivia tries to sleep, she's haunted by visions of the woman's smirking face, replaying the moment over and over in her mind. Meanwhile, the photograph remains in the living room, its expression darkening as if relishing the fear it's inspiring. A few days after Olivia's last encounter with the photograph, the family begins noticing odd, unexplainable events around the house. Lights flicker on and off. Doors creak open on their own, and cold drafts seem to appear out of nowhere, chilling the warm atmosphere of their home. Emma, the mother, dismisses these events as electrical issues or drafts. But Olivia knows something darker is at work. She feels a presence following her, a heavy feeling of being watched, especially when she passes by the photograph in the living room. One evening, as Olivia is walking down the hall, she hears soft whispering, like someone murmuring her name. She freezes, her eyes drawn towards the living room, where she sees a faint shadow moving near the photograph. Olivia's heart pounds as she watches the shadow disappear, now with an even more intense, sinister expression. The photograph itself has changed again. This time the woman's eyes are narrowed, and her smirk has turned into a chilling, knowing smile. Olivia realizes with growing horror that the photograph is not just an image. It's aware, and it seems to be reaching out, drawing her in. After days of eerie occurrences, Emma decides they've had enough. Ignoring Olivia's growing warnings, she takes down the photograph from the living room wall, wraps it in an old cloth, and places it in a box in the attic. Emma dismisses it as an unnecessary relic, while Olivia feels a sense of relief, hoping the disturbances will finally stop. But that evening, the family gathers in the living room, only to find the photograph mysteriously back in its original spot on the wall. Shocked, Emma insists that no one in the family retrieved it, and each member denies having touched it. Olivia's face pales as she realizes the photograph is still watching them, its expression now even darker, with the woman's mouth stretched into a sinister, knowing smile. Terrified but determined, James takes the photograph down once more, and this time drives it far out of town, abandoning it in a remote spot near an old junkyard. The family feels a sense of relief, hoping they're finally free of the photograph's eerie presence. However, when they return home, they find the photograph on the wall again, as if it never left. The woman's expression is now twisted with unmistakable malice. Her eyes narrowed, her lips curled into a taunting smile. The next morning, the family awakens to find the photograph still hanging in the living room, its presence feeling heavier, as if it were somehow taking control of the room. The woman's expression has grown disturbingly lifelike. The family's unease has now shifted to full-blown fear. Emma begins to piece together the strange timing of recent family tragedies, and a horrifying realization dawns upon her. She recalls each time the woman's expression changed. A tragedy soon followed. She shares her discovery with James and the children, her voice shaking as she explains the connection. Olivia, already terrified by the photograph, breaks down, fearing that the woman's gaze is now fixed on one of them. Desperate, the family decides they must destroy the photograph once and for all. James gathers a hammer and attempts to smash the glass. But as he swings, the hammer suddenly feels unbearably heavy, as if an unseen force is stopping him. The room fills with a freezing cold, and the lights flicker, plunging the room into a dim, eerie glow. The photograph remains intact, its glass unbroken. They attempt to burn it, but the flames sputter out as if repelled. Every method they try fails, and the photograph returns each time, completely unharmed. Realizing they are powerless against it, the family stands together, feeling utterly defeated as the woman in the photograph looks on, her smile now filled with dark satisfaction. After multiple failed attempts to destroy or remove the photograph, the family gathers in the living room one last time. They are exhausted, fearful, and now fully aware of the photograph's dark power, realizing they're trapped in its grasp. As midnight approaches, the room grows colder, and each family member begins to feel the weight of the photograph's presence. The woman's expression in the photo is now disturbingly lifelike, her eyes narrowed, and her mouth twisted into a knowing, sinister smile. She seems to be feeding off their fear, her gaze fixated on them with an intensity that is both chilling and inescapable. In a final act of desperation, the family fled the house, abandoning everything they had known. Their fear outweighed their attachment to the home, and as the clock struck midnight, they escaped into the night, leaving the photograph and its haunting gaze behind. Exhausted but relieved, they found refuge in a new place, believing they had left the darkness behind. For the first time in weeks, they felt a glimmer of hope, imagining a life free from her watchful eyes. But as the morning light broke through the windows, their relief turned to horror. There, on the wall of their new home, hung the photograph, the same tarnished frame, the same piercing gaze. Her smile had grown wider, colder, as if to remind them that no matter where they ran, she would always find them.